Carlson. And on every Wednesday night at 10 o'clock during the football season, the Fantasy Greek and myself will take you through each matchup and take your lineup questions at the hotline right here at Late Night Sports Radio.
You know, Keith, I just wanted to, for all the listeners out there, just to emphasize what a great thing it is to sort of participate in this show and be able to ask questions about their lineups. I mean, most people don't get that. You know, you're looking at charts and graphs and stuff and trying to figure stuff out, and you're never quite sure if you're right. And here you get live bodies, you know,
and some outstanding personalities. Let's just be honest here.
Yeah. Besides my little, what do you call my little things right at the end of my bit?
I like to refer to it as shtick.
Shtick, yeah.
It's your shtick. It's
you know, I try to keep things interesting, lively, a little dumb sometimes, but you know,
Jim's shtick. Okay,
Jim's shtick, yeah.
All right.
So anyway, we've got a good second half of games here.
The Atlanta Falcons travel to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The first time they met this season, back on September 18th, Atlanta destroyed the Buccaneers to the tune of 56-14. Yes, 56-14. Granted, that was in the Georgia Dome, and that was before we had all kinds of questions about the Atlanta Falcons. And Mike Smith is definitely on the hot seat. If you don't believe that, you are delusional. The last time we saw the Falcons, they were losing at home to the Detroit Lions. Well, actually, it was in England, but still it was a home game, I guess. On a last-second field goal after the Falcons choked away a 21-0 lead. And then I proceeded to start spelling Falcons with LOL in the middle of that word. And the Buccaneers were losing to the Cleveland Browns last week, 22-17. See here, kids. This is one of those games where if Atlanta doesn't win this game and they fall to 2-7, then you can pretty much guarantee that Mike Smith will be fired before the season's over. I'll make that prediction. I'll make that prediction right now. Tampa Bay is a tire fire right now. Okay, they are just there's no hope right now this season. It is over. They don't have the defensive personnel. Atlanta is under the gun coming off a bye week. They've had 2 games to prepare for this team. It is a division game. I don't think there's any way Atlanta loses this game.
I got Atlanta too, Keith. But for purposes of the show tonight, there are only 2 words that really matter about this game, and that is no defense. There's absolutely no defense that either of these 2 teams has. I mean, you can ask for a better situation for guys like Matt Ryan, Julio Jones, Roddy White, going up against a defense that's given up 285 yards passing and 18 TDs to date. That is just horrible. And then how about Bobby Rainey and even Charles Sims? I'm not one of these people that when it came to Charles Sims, I recommended adding him to your team. If you had the room on your bench, just sort of watch him and invest in a player just to see what happens, because nobody really knows what's going to happen. But the reality is they're facing a team that's given up 130 yards rushing and 13 TDs to date to running backs. That is crazy. I like Mike Evans, Vincent Jackson in this game as well, 280 yards passing and 10 TDs allowed. But it's just one of these games that, you know, you've got some people, you pick them up, you plug them in. Even Steven Jackson, he makes for an RB2, a low RB2 this week. But there's just no defense. I'm taking the Falcons because the Bucs, I don't care who the quarterback is, I don't think they can score enough points. And I also think they're going to give up more points. Josh McCown, one word for him, yikes. And Austin Seferian-Jenkins, I might avoid him this week just for statistical reasons. And the Falcons should come out on top, Keith. Falcons win.
It's scary. We're agreeing on an awful lot. So far, there's only been one game where we haven't.
I can't believe you picked the Dolphins. I did not think you would go with the Dolphins.
Oh, you come on! You know me. I'm crazy wacky. I picked Carolina to beat the Saints. I picked Houston to beat Philadelphia. Picked the Redskins to beat the Vikings last week.
Well, I don't think it was that crazy of a pick. So you must have had a lucid moment, my friend.
Oh, just because you thought you had it first. That's why it's a lucid moment. See, if it was different, if we were disagreeing, like if you were picking Detroit, you'd be like, "Oh man, this guy's crazy. Why do I even bother doing this show anymore?" But I'm just saying.
Well, put it this way. Yeah, Steve would agree with me.
Exactly. The Denver Broncos travel to the Oakland Raiders. Raiders 0 for the season so far. The poor Raiders. If I told you that the Raiders were going to start Derek Carr, the rookie, and by this time in the season he was going to have more touchdowns than interceptions, you'd think that's a pretty good season, wouldn't you? I think so.
I do, yeah.
Yeah. Derek Carr is the future of this franchise. Hopefully they don't destroy him before they figure out how to win. The problem for the Raiders is simply that they're facing the Broncos. The Broncos are 6-2. They went to New England and they lost to Belichick because he has Peyton Manning's number. He just does. The good news for the Broncos is that Monty Ball is apparently practicing a little bit, even though he is currently listed as out. So Ronnie Hillman will get the start, which, if you ask me, it should not be Monty Ball's job when he comes back. That's just me. I'm a little bit of a cutthroat, and I never confuse effort with results, unless it's Jay Cutler, of course. So I am picking Denver on the road because I really just don't think the Raiders have a chance. That simple.
It is that simple. But I did want to point out a couple things, Keith, and I thought this was interesting. The Raiders' pass defense, number 10 in the league, with 227 yards allowed. I was really a little bit stunned by that number. And in terms of TDs, they've only given up 12. So that's, 1.2 per game, something like that. Now, that doesn't necessarily equate to Peyton Manning throwing 1 or 2 TDs. More than likely, he'll throw 3. But it certainly does mean that the Raiders have a chance to at least have a good outing, and especially Derek Carr. He's one of my sleepers this week at quarterback. If you're desperately looking around the waiver wire and you have, like a guy like Tom Brady on a bye, certainly you can go with Carr if your waivers are that thin and give it a go. There's certainly a lot of upside here. For the Broncos, you're obviously starting your usual suspects: Demarius Thomas, Emmanuel Sanders, Julius Thomas, and, of course, Peyton Manning. I love the Broncos' defense this week against the Raiders. They got a rookie under center. You got to give them a go. But the one player that I would like to feature for the Broncos would be Ronnie Hillman, who you mentioned. He's going up against a defense along 132 yards per game and 9 TDs to date. He, besides Peyton Manning, is likely the surest thing on the field and one of the best plays. Start him with confidence, and I would even say if he's not in the top 12, he's certainly a borderline top 12 running back. Give James Jones and Andre Holmes a look at the wide receiver 3 and flex play, because I really do think Derek Carr is going to have a good game this week.
All right, the St. Louis Rams travel to the Arizona Cardinals. How about those Rams, those 3-5 Rams? And then you look at the other side. Well, how about those Cardinals? The Rams beating the 49ers 13-10 last week on the road. The Cardinals going into Dallas and saying, well, I don't care if you got your back up. We're not going to make any excuses. And taking that game. Andre Ellington with 21 rushes for 95 yards. Carson Palmer, 22 of 34 for 249 and 3 touchdowns, overcoming an early interception in that game. For the Rams, you tip your cap to Austin Davis because the guy's got guts. Trey Mason is now taking over as the running back, 19 rushes for 65 yards last week against the 49ers. The thing is, the Rams are all heart. They are. I think Arizona is a little bit more. They're 7-1. You don't win 7 games, 7 out of 8 by accident. They're 5th in the league in points allowed. The Rams on the other side are 26th in points scored. It's just a question of whether or not you can put up enough points. And while the Arizona Cardinals are not perfect offensively, they're good enough to win this game, definitely. I'm going to take the Cardinals.
Keith, this was initially a tough game to get a read on because of this last game that the Rams played against the 49ers, where they won 13-10. It was the best game they had defensively, and I can't tell you how long. And when you look at that, you kind of say, oh my, have they turned a corner? Has something happened to this team to make you pay attention and say they're playing with heart? And regardless of what your answer is to that question, the reality is the Cardinals are the hottest team in football, and you can't go against a team that's sitting 7-1, playing at home. The Cardinals should win this game hands down. Plus, they're going against a Rams defense, which is the 5th worst in the league, and an offense that can't even break 20 points, at least based on their most recent play. For the Cardinals, God, I love Andre Ellington this week, and I believe I have him down as a top 10. If you're going around the internet looking at stuff, come by thefantasygreek.com. Check out our player rankings this week. They're all done. They're all set up. Andre Ellington's playing a defense giving up 136.2 yards per game and 8 TDs to date. He's in line for a big game. I like Larry Fitzgerald, Michael Floyd, wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3. You can start Carson Palmer if you need him. You definitely got to start the Cardinals defense this week. The Rams have allowed a total of 6 special team / defensive touchdowns on the season. Hopefully the Cardinals will make that 7. For the Rams, Austin Davis is sort of the wild card for them. And in this game, if he gets out there and takes advantage of a very weak or very poor Cardinals pass defense, you could get an upset in this game. But you're not going to play him in fantasy. You're not going to take that risk. But if you want to play somebody that's interesting, play Kenny Britt. Now with Brian Quick out, Britt has easily moved in as the next best receiver in this game. Austin Davis has shown some confidence in him, and you can get him on fantasy gridirons as a wide receiver 3, but I would prefer more of a flex option. Trey Mason's not a bad play, but he's not a good one either. This is one of the best rush defenses in the league, and in fact, in the leagues that I do have him, I have benched him. Consider it, because all the Cardinals are giving up is 80 yards and 4 TDs to date. Cardinals win on the road, hottest team in football, Keith. Go Bruce Arians.
They really are.
Yeah.
Just remember.
I was actually, when I was working on this, I was thinking to myself, where did we have them in our power rankings? And I'm 99% sure they're in the top 10. Again, something that's on our site and people can come check out.
Well, they would have to be, I would imagine. Just remember, Bears fans, that when you yell at Mark Trestman, that they could have had Bruce Arians. That's it. That's all I'm going to say on that. Anyway. The New York Giants travel to the Seattle Seahawks. The Giants have not been good. And if you watched that game last Monday night, they were the best volleyball team in the NFL. Not wanting to catch anything, but rather bat balls, apparently. Not good when you're a wide receiver, by the way. Excuse me. If I told you that Eli Manning had a 16-5 touchdown-interception ratio, would you be shocked by that? Because I was when I saw that, because I really thought that it would be a lot worse than that, because everyone was ready to write him off. The Giants are working with pretty much, Eli and Odell Beckham right now, who put up a nice game. But other than that, you just don't know what they are. They don't know what they are. And they're going to Seattle, who is banged up. The list, the names on the injury list of questionable players. Max Unger, Byron Maxwell, Bobby Wagner, Russell Okung, Jaron Johnson, Cam Chancellor, guys that are contributors that may or may not play, but they're still going to Seattle. And the Giants are 1-3 on the road. Seattle's the toughest place to play in the NFL for a variety of reasons. I will pick the Seahawks.
And I'm going to take the Seahawks, too. The Giants right now, they're pretty banged up. I mean, they lost Prince Amukamara for the rest of the season. I think that was a significant loss in their pass defense. And it's already a defense that is somewhat struggling, one of the top 10 worst in the league, giving up 14 pass TDs and 8 rushing TDs to date. For me, you're taking the Seahawks at home, where Marshawn Lynch should do a repeat of last week's just monstrous game. Well, I don't know that I'd call it monstrous, but it certainly was refreshing to see him break loose on the gridiron. You should see that again this week against a team that'll be giving him roughly around 150 all-purpose yards and 1 TD. Russell Wilson goes up against the defense, giving up 275 pass yards per game and to date 14 TDs. Eli Manning's not a good play this week. I mean, let's give him the average, which is 220 yards allowed by the Seahawks, but then you're looking at either 1 or 2 TDs. And my guess would be likely closer to 1. Even if they have the amount of players that you've indicated that don't end up playing on Sunday, I still have a hard time fathoming them getting more than 2 passing TDs in this matchup. But I do like Odell Beckham. I think he once he gets through this game, and if he walks away with some decent fantasy production, I think you're looking at a guy that's become matchup proof in fantasy football. And as I wrote on today's article on Odell Beckham, would be approaching fantasy studdom. Did you get that? Studdum.
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 New word.
Yes. And the other player I like for the Giants is Larry Donnell.